in the entire world. And many of their wines have won prizes literally across the globe, so much so that their blue bottle Moscato is one of the most popular worlds in the non-Jewish world. So it's just amazing that I'm a great grandchild of the founding fathers and mothers of the vintners and those that make wine, and I don't like wine. Why I'm saying that is because Purim is a challenging holiday for me. We all know you're supposed to drink wine on Purim, and I try to do it, but it just doesn't go anywhere. So if anyone has any great tips on how to start loving wine, you could send that to rabbiSlandau@gmail.com. And if they actually work, you never know, you could win a very special prize, maybe a bottle of Herzog wine. You never know. Okay. I'd like to begin with a story. Yeah, Gene, I agree with you. I'm sorry about that. We didn't go into vodka, just saying. So anyways, I'd like to begin with a cute little story, meaningful story of a couple in Israel, which I think frames the conversation and what we're going to talk about, and really I think will get us into the heart and the soul of Purim and give us an understanding of how powerful Purim really is. So there was a couple in Israel who got married with the expectations of establishing a beautiful Jewish home. And sadly, those expectations were never met, as they couldn't have children. And they began a very difficult procedure of, should say, a journey of trying to become parents. And they tried everything and anything in their arsenal, from spiritual to conventional, and they really just were not able to conceive. And it got to a point where they decided that they would go on the next best journey, which is to adopt a child. Fascinatingly enough, our Jewish response and Jewish law teach us that if a person adopts a child, they fulfill the Torah commandment of having a child, which is amazing and remarkable. So this is what they decided to do. And in Israel as well, it's quite a lengthy process until a person is able to adopt a child. They vet you to make sure that you're an appropriate parent, that you're emotionally stable, and it was a long process. And finally, the day comes where they get a call that their baby was just born, and they can go down to the hospital and they can pick up the baby. But before they're given the baby, there's one thing that they have to go through, and that is a final series, a battery of questions from the adoption board in the hospital, just to make sure that they're all on the same page. And then they sign the papers and they come home with a beautiful, brand new life. And as they're sitting there and they're answering the questions, getting every question right, all of a sudden the questioner looks at them, and he could tell that they're a religious couple. He's wearing a kippah, and could tell. And he says, "Do you promise to love this child more than anything in your entire life? Again, do you promise that you will love this child more than anything else that exists?" And the husband looks at the wife, and the wife looks at the husband, and they both nod their head. They said, "No." So what do you mean? What are you talking about? Is there something we don't know about? And the husband and the wife both unanimously say, "Listen, we probably love God more than we love this child, but that's why we'll love this child, because this child is a piece of God." And the questioner says, "That's such a cliche answer. Answer the question. Will you love this child more than anything else you love in the entire world?" And again, they both said, "We're going to love it as much as we can, but the Torah says you should love God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your resources. We can't promise. We may end up loving God more. We don't know. We're going to try." And the questioner says, "You know what? You're not emotionally stable people." And he shuts the dossier on them, and he sends them home. You can only imagine what that car ride was like. So many years, so many dreams, all shattered in one instant. And there was a stone silence in the car on the way home. Both of them are like, what did we just do? We sold away our happiness. We blacklisted ourselves in the Israeli adoption network. We'll never be parents in any way possible. And they got home. They come into their apartment, their quiet apartment, which had been outfitted for a little baby. There was a bassinet, and there was a crib, and there was a changing table, and there was diapers and everything, and there were signs on the door from the neighbors, and they come in empty-handed. And the husband looks at the wife, and the wife looks at the husband, and they say to one another, "Listen, no one could ever fault us for not trying. If God doesn't want us to be parents, we won't be parents, but you would assume he'd be in our corner." And truthfully, that was the lowest point, probably, in their entire marriage. But you know what they say, when you hit rock bottom, there's only one direction, and that's upwards. And miraculously, ladies and gentlemen, 9 months later, a beautiful, beautiful biological child was born to this couple. And they became parents this time on their own. They came into that apartment and they refreshed that bassinet and they probably bought new diapers. But this time they came in, instead of in the darkest spot, in the lightest spot in their entire lives. The story, true story. I read it in a book by Rabbi David Ashir, who's a great author, and by the way, verifies every story that he prints. And my question on the story is what happened? I mean, biologically, they weren't able to have children. I mean, that's what it seems. So much so, it almost seemed like everything was stacked against them. No children. So what happened? What happened at that moment that somehow reversed everything? And they merited a miracle, I guess you could say. They merited the incredible gift of parenthood, which, by the way, there is no greater joy in the world than being a parent, and also no greater challenge than being a parent. I speak from experience. Thank God we have 9 children. So thank God for that. So the question is, what's the essence of the story? What was happening? So if you give me a little bit of time and you open your hearts and you open your minds and you open your souls, then I hope with Hashem's will that you'll get a great understanding into the story, as well as such an amazing gift. This is my personal Mishloach Mano, Purim gift to each and every one of you, a beautiful understanding into the holiday, into the Yom Tov of Purim. But to do that, I need to do something very Jewish. And that is to ask a lot of questions. Because Jews ask a lot of questions, do they not? As a matter of fact, so much so that a fellow one time asked a Jewish fellow, why do Jews ask so many questions? What do you think he said? Why not? But anyways, so here are a bunch of questions about Purim. Some of them you may have heard of, and some of them not, but let's get straight into it. So here are the questions. Question number 1. We know just in 10 seconds that the story of Purim was that they tried to pass a law against us, another Holocaust, to annihilate every single man, woman, and child, which were all living under the jurisdiction and the domain of Achashverosh and his henchman, Haman, their Führer and Goebbels, or whoever his second in command was, and they wanted to destroy every single one of us. And this incredible miracle happens, and the Jewish people somehow get Esther Esther becomes the queen. And at the moment that everything was going to come apart, she goes before the king. She makes these parties. She tells the king Haman wants to kill her. The king kills Haman. Mordechai is appointed instead of Haman, and we drink as much as we possibly can because of that miracle. That's the story of Purim, literally in a nutshell. Now, here's a fascinating thing. Our tradition teaches us that when the Messianic era comes, when the days of Mashiach come, all of the Jewish holidays will cease to exist in the form that they are right now. So the Pesach, the Passover, the Rosh Hashanah and the Yom Kippur that they're not going to be there. Maybe they'll be in some way, shape, or form, but they definitely will not be the way that they are right now. There's only one holiday that will endure forever, no matter what type of spiritual era we come into, no matter where we find ourselves. There's one holiday that will forever endure, and that is Purim. I mean, it's possible to say that Purim is more powerful than Passover. It's more, I guess you could say, more holy than Yom Kippur. It's more festive than Sukkot and Simchas Torah. Now, question number 1 is, why is that? What is it about Purim that just for some odd reason is so holy and so precious and so eternal that it'll always be part of the Jewish people? That's question number 1. Question number 2, the Arizal, the great Lurianic Kabbalist, perhaps one of the greatest Kabbalists in the last 1,000 years, says something which is not his own, but he shares it with us and he kind of brought it to the world, that if you look in the Torah, the word Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year by far, is actually called Yom Kippurim or Yom HaKippurim, the day of atonement, the day of forgiveness. Yet he says, he makes a little play on words, almost like a pun that says Yom Kippurim. That Yom Kippur is so awesome, it's so holy, and it's so precious. It's Kippurim. It's second only to Purim. That means to say, if you stop a random Jew on the street and you say, what's the holiest day of the year? And they tell you Yom Kippur, you have a right to go, wrong. What is the holiest day of the Jewish year? Purim. Holier than Yom Kippur. Now, I don't know about you, but when I get to the end of Yom Kippur, and I'm actually lead the final service, the Ne'ilah, it's rocking where we pray, and so many people really are elevated, people who really weren't in touch. It's so holy. But yet, for some reason, it seems as Purim has the potential to be holier than that. How do we begin to understand that? It just sounds so bizarre, and it sounds so off. That's question number 2. So question number 1 is, Purim is the only holiday that will endure. And question number 2 is that Purim is holier than Yom Kippur. Just sounds a little over the top. Next simple question. There's a law in the Code of Jewish Law, in the Shulchan Aruch, that there's a difference between Purim and every other day of the year in one fascinating aspect. Just to give people here a little bit of perspective, we lived in East Brunswick for the last 17 years. In September, we relocated to Lakewood. It's a tiny little Jewish town somewhere in New Jersey. And in that town, there are a lot of Jews. So much so that I literally could walk about, 2,000 feet and get into any one of 5 different synagogues. A Sephardic one is 4 houses away. One for professionals is about 10 houses away. One for guys who are less than professionals, about 20 houses away, literally 5 synagogues. This morning, I prayed in a minyan. Now, I'm telling you, this is the truth. I prayed in the morning service in a minyan. At least 20 people approached me throughout the service and asked me for charity. Literally, they come around during the service. Please give me some charity. Please give me some charity. Please give me some charity. It's expensive. It's like $20 a morning before you even start, just based on charity. You can't give regardless of $1. You feel stupid doing that. But that's great. It's a holy way to start your day. Now, really, I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't have to give all those people. I can turn to them and say, prove that you need it. Show me verification that you're poor. Maybe you're just a scoundrel or a scammer. I don't, because I don't know. I never had this opportunity for the last 20 years. So I'm still on a high of being able to give people money and help other people who don't have so much money. But by Jewish law, I could tell them, prove it. If you can prove you need money, I have to give you. The Torah says if a poor person approaches you, they need money, you got to help them out. You don't know that they're poor. Maybe they just want to buy beer. So Purim is different. Purim, the law is any person that stretches out their money for charity, you have to give them. You have no right to ask them, hey, show me that you're poor. Prove it. Let me see your bank account. Let me see your LinkedIn profile. I don't know, whatever it is. Show me. We don't have that on Purim. Purim is different than every other day of the year. The Jewish law mandates that if someone opens their hand, you have to give them. And because of this, huge sums of money are given out in the Jewish world. Personally, I know somebody who gives more than 6 figures just on Purim Day. Okay? God should give us all that opportunity to have 6 figures to give. But that's the question. Why is Purim so powerful that for some reason a guy asks you for money, a woman asks you for money on Purim? No verification needed. Chuck the money over. That's the question. By the way, I'd just say that I usually go to the bank before Purim and I get like a lot of ones. It's just cheaper that way. And throughout the entire Purim day, I just try to give it out. Makes sense. Get it? Makes sense. That's just the way to do it. That's how we do it. So that's another question that I want to ask. Why is it that Purim is so powerful? I want to ask you another question. There's only 2 major rabbinic holidays in the year. Can anyone share with me what the other one is? One is Purim. What's the other rabbinic holiday? Come on, this is an easy question. Huh?
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah. Very good. Hanukkah is the other. Now contrast Hanukkah and Purim. On Hanukkah, there's only one mitzvah, one commandment. What's that? To light the menorah. Yes, there's customs to eat oily food, right? Why do we eat latkes on Hanukkah? Because you eat one the first day and it burns you for 8 days, right? That's why we eat latkes on Hanukkah. That's how it is. But why is it that on Purim, it's so packed with mitzvahs? You got to listen to the Megillah, the story of Purim, twice. You have to give money to the poor, matanas lavyaim. You have to give mishlach manos, food packages to your friends. You have to eat a Purim meal. It's so busy. Look at Hanukkah. Hanukkah has one little tiny miracle and one little mitzvah. I mean, it was bad times during Hanukkah. They didn't want to let us keep Judaism, which is really what ensures our future. But why is it that Purim is so packed? Not so Hanukkah. It's just got one mitzvah. Just sounds so strange. And then everyone's favorite question on the entire Purim, probably the question that's been asked the most times in the history of the Jewish people, is that it says in the Talmud, Chayiv Inish L'Psume B'Purad L'Yoda Ben Arham L'Baruch Mordechai, translated from the Aramaic, Babylonian into English, a person is obligated to get inebriated, intoxicated on Purim until they don't know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. Now, thank God, Hashem has put me through a lot of Purims in a lot of different places, Israel, the United States, and others. And I have never seen a drunk that could not tell the difference between blessed be Mordechai and cursed be Haman. Even people that are really drunk, if you tell them, blessed be who, they'll be like Mordechai. Cursed be who, they'll be like Haman. How do you get to that level of intoxication? Now you may tell me, Rabbi Landau, go to Rutgers on a Thursday night and you'll find people who are that level of intoxication on what's lovingly referred to as Thirsty Thursday. Maybe. But I have never met a Jewish guy who was so plastered on Purim that he couldn't tell the difference between blessed be Mordechai and cursed be Haman. If you have, good for you. You should probably give them a medal. But what does that mean? And question number two, it just sounds so not Jewish. I mean, I love the Irish, blessed be the Irish. I could hear an Irish holiday where you got to get, so plastered that you don't know the difference. It just doesn't sound Jewish to mandate a person to get so hammered that they don't know the difference between blessed be Mordechai and cursed be Haman. Like, hello? It just sounds so not Jewish. And the coolest thing is, imagine this big rabbi with a white beard. He's just sitting there, he's pounding shots. Like, that's such a hard thing to imagine. But it seems like it's a law, and it's brought down in the code of Jewish law. By the way, I'm not so religious. I'm just saying, I know as people are very religious on Purim. I'm not so religious. On Purim, I kind of take things much lighter. I'm so bad with alcohol that every year I try a different type of alcohol with the hope that I'll feel okay afterwards. In the last 5 to 10 years, by far the craziest Purim I ever had was arak. You guys know what arak is? It's like that stuff. It's like the Middle Eastern stuff that tastes like black licorice. Whoever paired black licorice and alcohol was high. But the bottom line is that was a Purim to be remembered by others, because I have very little memory of that Purim. But regardless, getting back to what we're saying, what's the understanding? What does it mean that we should get so plastered until we don't know the difference between blessed? Okay. So, and just one more tiny little question. When it comes to Purim, there's an obligation not just to be happy on Purim, but the whole month of Purim, you're supposed to try to be happy. You don't find that by holidays. You're supposed to be happy on Passover. The Torah says be happy on the holiday, on Sukkot, on Simchas Torah. A whole month of happiness for a rabbinic holiday? This all sounds like so crazy. What's going on here? So if you listen carefully and you pay attention and you focus, you'll hear something which is so profound and so powerful. Let me take you on a tiny little historical journey of what happened to the Jewish people during the Purim story. The Talmud teaches us, based on the words in the actual Megillah itself, that the Jewish people were in very hot water during the period of time of the Purim story. You see, it was right at the end of their exile. The first temple had been destroyed almost 70 years earlier. It was about to be rebuilt, but the Jewish people were not on the right spiritual level for the temple to be rebuilt. There was a lot of problems in the Jewish community. There were people who didn't have the proper belief. They bowed to idols. There were Jewish people that were disparate and broken. There was not a unity in the Jewish community. There were people who went and partook in this amazing feast that Achashverosh made to celebrate the fact that the temple never would be rebuilt. Imagine a Jewish person going to such a feast. It's like going to your own wake. Alive. It just doesn't make any sense, going to your own funeral. So there was a lot of issues in the Jewish community. And when Haman, for some reason, was able to get Achashverosh's signature and get a proclamation and have it signed and sealed that says that all the Jewish people would be killed on the 13th of the month of Adar in the upcoming year, the Talmud teaches us that up in heaven, the Almighty also signed on the dotted line and said, I agree. That had never happened in our history. In the history of the Jewish people, whenever we had problems, whenever we had skirmishes, whenever we had expulsions, whenever we had wars, God never said, I'm done with the Jewish people. He never signed on the dotted line and said, I agree with the Nazis. I agree with the United Nations. I agree with whoever is anti-Jewish people, etc., etc. He never did that. There was only one time in history, and that was during the Purim story. And when that happened, that was really the end. We should not, by nature, even the laws of spiritual nature, be having this conversation. It was over. Just like when a king signs something into law, it's very difficult to get it retracted. How much more so when the Almighty himself signs on the dotted line, signs off beneath the document and says, I agree, I concur. It was really, really bad. And as the leaders of the Jewish people, there were two leaders during that period of time. Mordechai, I guess you could say, at least at that period of time, the undisputed leader of the Jewish people, a member of the Sanhedrin, the great Jewish Supreme Court, an old and brilliant Torah scholar, beloved. There was also a political leader, although for some reason the Persians didn't know who that was, but it was Esther. She probably had the second most power, at least, and the most sway for the Jewish people. So when they both find out, and Esther sends this message to Mordecai, you should know things are really, really bad, and I don't even know what to do about it. Both of them were panicking. They both felt a responsibility. What are we going to do with our people? If God signed off on us, we're toast. We're done with. What's going to be? So here's something fascinating that most people don't know. Mordecai and Esther had two different approaches of what one does when God signs off on it. Esther's approach was the following statement in the Megillah. Leich kenois es kol haYehudim. Unify, solidify, and gather all the Jewish people. Create a unity that never existed previously. Esther felt that even if a decree was signed against every individual, that for some reason they should be part of this terrible Holocaust, but it was never signed against the collective power of the Jewish people, of an incredible group of people getting together, feeling together. And we all know this, by the way, that there's nothing in the world that unifies Jews more than anti-Semitism. So Esther says, let's capitalize on the negative here. Jews are going to put their differences aside if they need to, because they have to have a common enemy. Let's create a unity in the Jewish community that has never existed ever before, or maybe only existed once before, at the foot of Sinai. If we could create that, we have the power, the spiritual power, to circumvent the laws of spiritual nature, and somehow we could get that decree overturned, even if God signed off. Just to give you a perspective, there's nothing in the world that makes a parent happier than when their children love each other. There's nothing in the world that can kind of sway God than when the Jewish people all get along with one another. That's what Esther's approach was. Mordecai had a different approach. This is so fascinating. Mordecai's approach was, that's great, Esther. I think we should have unity. I'm not saying you're wrong. But the Jewish people need to work on one aspect of their existence, and that is bitachon. Bitachon, translated loosely, means absolute trust in Hashem. That means to say they need to somehow dig deep into the resources of their souls and their minds and say, even if God gave up on us, we never gave up on him. And if a Jewish person, the Jewish people, are capable of reaching that incredibly lofty level to say, God, I don't care if you signed off on us, we will never sign off on you, then they have an ability to rise above and to go beyond even something that the Almighty signs. This was the disparity. Esther felt it's got to be done interpersonally, creating a unity, and Mordecai felt that it had to be something where the Jewish people strengthen and fortify their trust in God to levels perhaps we'd never experienced previously. And Esther agreed to Mordecai, and she says, let's do both. So you take a look in the Megillah. The Megillah says that Esther tells Mordecai, Leich k'nais kol haYehudim. Gather all the Jewish people together in this incredible unity. B'tsumu alai. Let them fast. And fasting is supposed to bring a person to great repentance, to tshuva, and hopefully that'll ultimately bring the Jewish people to trust, to belief in God, where they will not give up on God, quote unquote, even if God gave up on us. That was the story. And this incredible revolution takes place in the Jewish people. And through this terrible decree, they rectify a lot of the issues that needed to be rectified. They put aside the differences and they fortify their belief in God, even though many of them had perhaps not had the proper belief and trust. Like we said previously, they worshiped other things or had other beliefs, or at least believed in other things as well. And what happens all of a sudden? The most amazing thing happens. There's a total revolution in the Jewish people. And all of a sudden they realize that there's nobody for us to rely upon besides our Father in heaven. And that there's no one for us to rely upon besides one another. And the Jewish people attain a level perhaps never, ever attained before. It was so powerful that not only did it reverse the decree and get rid of the Haman, the anti-Semites, all those people who were against the Jewish people, but it also was the catalyst for rebuilding the Second Temple. By the way, we know the Second Temple was destroyed because the Jews didn't get along with one another. It only could have been rebuilt if the Jewish people had tremendous unity with one another. That was the story of Purim in a nutshell. Now, I want to share with you one verse in the Megillah. If you understand this and internalize this, it is such a gift. The Megillah says like this. The Megillah says that Esther, the queen, wrote the following statement. She wrote about about the holiday of Purim being part of the Jewish people forever. And Esther writes the following. She said, and these Purim days are remembered and observed in every generation by each and every family, each country, and each city. And these Purim days will never cease from the Jews, and their memory will never cease from their offspring. It's in chapter 9 in the book of Esther. What does that mean? It means the following. Listen to this because it's so profound. That even if an entire year, for some reason, we couldn't get God to answer our prayers, we couldn't get God's attention, if you want to call it that. Even if on Yom Kippur, we somehow tried to get something that we needed, and for some reason, God said, I'm sorry. I checked your situation out. I looked through the books. I looked at the checks and balances. I'm sorry. I hear your prayers, and my answer is no. But on Purim, because of the spiritual energy, that Esther and Mordechai somehow will be able to bring the Jewish people together. When we come to that day of Purim, each and every year, we have the power and the ability to tap into that energy, which was created thousands of years ago, and reach levels in trust of God and unity in our community that can ultimately be the lever that toggles tremendous salvation above and beyond what we're capable of doing any other day of the year. And by the way, that's why it's called Yom Kippur. It's called Yom Kippurim. Yom Kippur, God judges us, and he's very merciful, but there's often that God says, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, honey, God says, I just can't. But on Purim, because of this incredible level, and because of Esther and Mordechai's plea that these days will always remain part of us, in each family, each and every one of us has our own needs. In each city, every city has its own needs. In each country, take a look at our brothers and sisters in Ukraine and many other countries that are suffering. Wherever they are, the day of Purim is so powerful that when we try to create a unity with the Jewish people around us, and we try really hard to tap into the power of trusting and believing in God, the most insane and crazy things could happen. The supernatural can become the natural. That's the holiday of Purim. And that is so powerful that God never will take that away from us. Even if Pesach falls away and Sukkot falls away and Simchas Torah, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, all those holidays somehow lose their power and potency. But for some reason, the chance one day a year to tap into this incredible spiritual energy, which is above and beyond anything we could get the entire year, is something that the Jewish people will have for now and forever. Now, I want to share a theory. This is totally LOL, Landau on life. I don't know that it's true, but I'd like to add one fascinating point. I have seen in my very short term of intoxication and inebriation, two fascinating things that happen to people. Number one, and I've seen this many times, people who don't get along with one another, somehow when they get intoxicated, they're hugging each other, they're all of a sudden buddying. Look at that person. What are you doing all of a sudden? I don't know. For some reason, it takes away, the negativity, the edge, and people who don't always get along with one another are okay with one another. I'm talking about good drunks, not evil drunks, good drunks. And number two, and I've seen this so many times as a teacher of high school students. Yes, I'm not so proud of this, but sometimes my 12th graders drink a lot on Purim and become pretty inebriated. And the coolest thing in the world is to watch them to say Birkat HaMazon, the grace after the meals at the Purim meal, or to see them try to daven Mar of the evening service. Some of them are kids who struggle with prayer and talking to God, but when they're drunk, oh my gosh, they're out loud having conversations with God. And to me, that's really inspiring because I think that's the truth. Our tradition tells us that when wine comes in, the secrets come out, because in Hebrew, the word yayin, the numerical value is 70, and sod, which means secret, the secrets come. We all know this. And I don't know, maybe for some reason, the Torah says, our tradition says, the Jewish law says, on Purim, maybe you need this. Maybe you can't get to the level of belief and trust in God without the filter being taken down. Maybe you can't feel for another Jewish person the way you should without the filter being taken down. Take it down and let's see what happens. And hopefully amazing things could happen. And by the way, this explains the question I asked before. I've never in my life saw someone who couldn't know that blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman, and thought and said, cursed is Mordechai and blessed is Haman. But I think the answer to that is that Haman, cursed is Haman, is a blessing. Because without Haman, we never would have had this day. And without this day, we never would have had the opportunity to tap into this incredibly lofty, amazingly high level of Purim. So yes, cursed be Haman, but at the same time, blessed be Haman. And yes, maybe Mordechai made life very difficult for us, but the bottom line is when push comes to shove, all of a sudden the Jewish people found themselves in a place that they never thought they could find themselves, where they were able to, if you could even say such a thing, to go above and beyond what the Almighty himself had written. And God signed off on the Jewish people and said, may the eternity of the Jewish people continue. And every single year, we have this incredible power. Now, I want to add one last point to this and maybe finish within a crazy story. You know, remember we said it says in Jewish law that anyone that opens their hand, you have to give them. You don't got to get verification if they're poor or not. Well, it works the same way with God. A whole year long, when we stretch out our hand and we say, God, I need this and I need that, and God says, prove it. Let me take a look at where you're holding. Not sure. But on Purim, the same way that when we give other people unconditionally, through Mishloach Manot, giving gifts to other people, Matanas Lavyonim, giving the gifts to the poor, giving tzedakah, the Almighty says, I mirror that as well. And we all know that in the Megillah, whenever it says the word Hamelech, the king, it doesn't just mean Achashverosh or Xerxes, the king. It also means God. And I want to share with you one pasuk. The verse says like this: when Esther comes before the king in that very intimate party with just her, Haman, and the king, he says to her, the king says to her, the king says to her, Masha Ilasech, what's your question? What's your request? And I'll give it to you. What's your deepest, most desire? And I'll make it happen. And we know that that works with God as well. A whole year long, we got to come before God. We beg, we plead, we ask. But on Purim, God says, Masha Elaseh, what do you really want? What's your innermost hope? What do you need this year more than anything else in the world? And the hope is that God will give it to us. That's this Purim. So even if a whole year long, for some reason, or years long, you've been trying to get somewhere, you've been trying to tap into something, you've been trying to get to a level, wherever it is, this Purim is a time to take a little bit of time, reflection, to really open your heart to God. If you need to do it while you're a little bit inebriated, hey, I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it that way. But however you need to do it, try to be honest, try to be real, and try to understand that Purim has such an incredible and amazing power. And this, by the way, is the reason that I think this woman and her husband were answered at that moment. Because Purim was a time where we hit rock bottom. Maybe in God's book, he signed off on us. But when we don't sign off on him, we never know what could happen. Rabbi Antalis, can I say a story? Is there enough time? Because I don't want to I can say one? You speak for yourself or you speak for the masses?
I speak for myself, but I really want to hear your stories.
Okay. I don't think I ever shared the story at Mesorah, but if I did, I beg your pardon. If I did, I probably shared it more than a year ago, so chances are I don't remember. So it's perfect. Anyways, so here's an incredible story. The story takes place in Israel, just like the story that we opened with. There was a family, a religious Jewish family, that had a beautiful son who was really a pride and a joy, with the apple of their eye, and everything went well with the son. He was what we call in Judaism a nachas machine. He just provided so much happiness and joy to his parents. But at some point in his teenage years, he rebelled, which happens sometimes. And he really went 180 degrees of anything he'd been taught or any of his parents' aspirations. And because of the way he was and his parents' inability to deal with the situation, right or wrong, they got into a terrible fight. And he basically one day told his parents, I will never talk to you for the rest of my life. And he stormed out of their house, a young man of about 16 years old. And he moved to Tel Aviv with a bunch of friends who were probably from similar backgrounds as he was, all trying to make it work. And sadly, they got involved in things they shouldn't have been involved with, selling certain banned substances and doing all kinds of bad things, and living artificial highs and being artificially happy. But then one day, he got into a huge fight with his roommates, and things went from bad from worse. He couldn't find anywhere else to stay. They badmouthed him in the street. No one would buy from him. And slowly but surely, he found himself homeless, penniless, and very hungry. And he made it the worst decision a person ever could make, that life just wasn't worth living. And he decided that one night, that would be the end of his life. There wasn't much to lose anyways. And he decided he was going to do it in a particular way. This was his thing. There was an old water tower, abandoned water tower on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. It was very, very high. And he would climb the ladder, basically, ladder, go all the way around the pole, all the way to the top. He would jump, and his miserable life would be terminated for once and for all. And he took a bus all the way to the outskirts of Tel Aviv, and he took a little hike to the water tower. And he started climbing the water tower with so many thoughts swirling in his mind, so much pain and so much agony. And as he's walking, and stair by stair, all of a sudden, he sees a piece of paper, which is strange. Why is a piece of paper on the stairs of a water tower? Shouldn't it blow off? And how did it get there in the first place? He's intrigued and he looks down and it's a piece of paper. It's an advertisement for a service that takes people to Bethlehem, to Beis Lechem, to the tomb of Rachel Imenu, our matriarch Rachel. He looks at this and he goes, if I've ever had a sign in my life, this is my sign. You know what? It's not so terrible if I push off my death a few more hours. Let me see if I can hitch to Bethlehem, which anyone who knows anything about Israel knows that's not an easy hitch. Bethlehem is not a Jewish area. But somehow, late at night, he finds himself with a ride, a hitch all the way to Bethlehem. And he walks into Kever Rachel, the tomb of Rachel. If you've ever been there, there's like a big parking lot outside next to the big wall around it. And then there's like an entrance where there's like a little synagogue on the right side. And then you eventually go to the tomb. It's a very powerful place, Rachel's tomb. And as he's walking in, all of a sudden he hears a lot of noise coming from the little sanctuary, the little chapel that they have there by Rachel's tomb. And he's wondering, it's very late at night at that point, why are there so many people there? And he freezes in his tracks when he sees a sign that says, even if you don't know us, please join us as we pray for our estrayed son. And it has his name on there. And he listens carefully and he recognizes some of the voices of people praying. It's his father, it's his brother, it's his cousins. And as he's standing in the hallway, unsure of where to go, he hears a voice, literally from a woman standing at the tomb of Rachel. And the voice goes like this: Mother Rachel, Rachel Imenu, the same way that you never gave up on the Jewish people. There's a whole story how Rachel never gave up on the Jewish people. So too, I will never give up on my son. I don't care where he is, and I don't care how far he's fallen. I will always love my son, and I will always welcome him back into my arms. God, I just ask you one thing, one opportunity to hold my child in my arms yet one more time. And as you guessed it, that was a voice of his own mother. And thus began a very long period of very slow healing. But eventually he came back home and he came back into the arms of his mom. And today, thank God, he's a functional, healthy, spiritual, successful young man. It was at the darkest moment, literally on those stairs, when everything was so bleak, when maybe God had signed off on his life. But at the same time, for some reason, some way, somebody hadn't signed off on him. And maybe it was his mother's prayers in Bethlehem and Rachel's tomb. We don't know what it was. But sometimes at the darkest time, that's where the ability to tap into the light is. And that's the story of Purim. It was the darkest times, yet somehow, v'nahapochu, it was turned to the time of most incredible, powerful, amazing light. And we have that ability in our hands this Wednesday night and Thursday to find time within that 24-hour period, to carve out time, to try to pray, to reflect, to have a real meaningful conversation with God in whatever language we speak best. And hopefully to have our dreams, our aspirations realized in the wildest and most unimaginable ways. Wishing each and every one of you a happy and a freilich and Purim and an amazing, amazing opportunity to connect with Hashem. Thank you so much for this opportunity. God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Landau. It happens to be, I actually remember that story because like this story, I borrowed many stories from you, Rabbi Landau. I hope it's okay. Please, please forgive me. But thank you so much, Rabbi Landau. Always amazing. Hopefully
it's really a pleasure to be here, and I wish such an amazing Purim to each and every one of you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Landau. Okay. Have an amazing Purim, Rabbi Landau. Good to see you. Okay, so now we are going to break out into the rooms, and I'm invited, like we all are, to join our rooms. Okay, awesome. I'm glad we got that in there. Did it just start
There we
recording?
go.
Okay, well, I'll take the blame.
I'll